Adam Haritan, and if you're interested in foraging for wild edible mushrooms, specifically in the winter months, then this is the video for you. You know, many people might hang up their mushroom baskets at the end of the autumn season, not really expecting to find too many edible species during the colder weeks of winter. However, if you look really closely, if you're in the right habitat and you know what you're looking for, you have a good chance of finding wild edible mushrooms. And so in this video, I'm going to feature 5 wild edible species that, for the most part, are really easy to positively identify. And to help you out, I'm going to show you a lot of images, and I'm going to cover a lot of detailed information regarding the identification of each species and its lookalike, so that you're well equipped and prepared to head out to the woods this time of year with basket in hand and successfully forage for free food from the fungal kingdom. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Let's start with the common oyster mushroom, PLEUROTUS OSTREATUS. This is one of the easiest mushrooms to positively identify, and it's one of the tastiest, so it's a great mushroom to learn if you're just getting started with foraging for wild mushrooms. So the overall size of the oyster mushroom is medium to somewhat large, and oyster mushrooms tend to grow in shelf-like clusters on wood, usually deciduous wood, but sometimes conifer. And usually they grow on dead trees, but sometimes you'll find oyster mushrooms parasitizing living trees. And if you find them on dead trees, usually you're finding oyster mushrooms on logs, on stumps, and up and down standing snags. And although you find oyster mushrooms usually growing in shelf-like clusters, sometimes you'll just find one oyster mushroom growing by itself. Sometimes you'll find oyster mushrooms growing scattered as well. And the role of the oyster mushroom on this wood is to decompose that wood. So we call these mushrooms saprophytic mushrooms. The season of the common oyster mushroom is usually fall through winter, though that season will extend into spring as well. And you find oyster mushrooms all throughout North America. The cap of the oyster mushroom is between 3 to 8 inches wide, and no surprise, it's oyster or kidney shaped. And although oyster mushrooms might be white, more frequently this species is grayish to brownish. Now when you look at the underside of the cap, you'll see that there are whitish gills that with age will sometimes become yellow. And these gills are decurrent gills. This is a key feature, meaning the gills run down the complete length of the cap, and if there's a stalk present, you'll see it running down the stalk. And speaking of the stalk, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. If it is there, it's usually short and off-center. But sometimes you'll just find an oyster mushroom directly attached to the wood with no stalk. If you take a spore print of the oyster mushroom, you'll find that it's whitish to pale lilac in color. Now the oyster mushroom does have a unique smell, and I tend to find that it's somewhat fishy and mushroomy, but no other mushroom really smells like the oyster mushroom. So whenever you do find an oyster mushroom, smell it and use that smell to compare it to other oyster mushrooms that you do find. The oyster mushroom does have a few lookalikes, including the angel wing mushroom known as Pleurosabella porogens, though this mushroom has thinner flesh and it's whiter in appearance, and it usually grows on conifers. So remember, the oyster mushroom PLEUROTUS OSTREATUS usually grows on deciduous trees, while angel wing mushrooms typically grow on conifers. I find them usually on eastern hemlock trees, dead eastern hemlock trees. Now thoughts on angel wing mushroom edibility are mixed because, interestingly, deaths have been attributed to consumption of the angel wing mushroom. However, other people have successfully eaten this mushroom with no ill effects experienced. So if you do encounter angel wing mushrooms, just do more research on them first. Now there are other PLEUROTUS species that do resemble the common oyster mushroom, however usually they grow earlier in the year. For example, the summer oyster mushroom, which is PLEUROTUS pulmonarius, tends to grow in the summer months through early fall, and that one's usually much whiter in appearance. So just to reiterate some key features for the oyster mushroom, you're looking for medium to large size white mushrooms growing in shelf-like clusters on wood. You're looking for gills on the underside that run the complete length of the underside of the cap. You're looking for a late season fruiting mushroom, so fall through winter, and the spore print of these mushrooms are white to pale lilac. Speaking of oyster mushrooms, there's another oyster mushroom that grows this time of year. And this particular mushroom is the late fall oyster, also known as SARCOMYXA serotina or PANELLUS serotinus. And that species name serotinus refers to its late season fruiting. The overall size of this particular mushroom is small to medium size, and they tend to grow in shelf-like clusters on wood, typically deciduous wood, though occasionally conifer. And although they grow in shelf-like clusters, sometimes you will find the late fall oyster mushroom just growing one at a time, so singly and sometimes scattered as well, usually across logs, up and down stumps, and standing snags. And the role of the late fall oyster is a decomposer of wood, so we call this mushroom a saprophytic mushroom. The season of the late fall oyster is fall through winter, and they tend to grow all throughout North America. The cap of the late fall oyster mushroom is between 1 to 4 inches wide, and it's usually fan or kidney shaped, and the color is very, very unique. So it's yellowish green to greenish gray, sometimes with violet hues. Whenever you touch the cap of the mushroom, it's somewhat sticky. Now the underside of the late fall oyster mushroom has gills that run the length of the underside of the cap, so these gills are decurrent, and the gills are yellowish to orangish yellow. And this mushroom usually has a stalk up to about 3/4 of an inch long and up to about 1/2 an inch wide. And it's usually short and stubby and somewhat velvety. The spore print of the late fall oyster mushroom is yellowish. Some lookalikes for the late fall oyster mushroom include PLEUROTUS OSTREATUS, the mushroom we already discussed. However, PLEUROTUS OSTREATUS, the common oyster mushroom, has a more whitish grayish cap with whitish gills and a white spore print. There's another lookalike known as the mock oyster mushroom, Phylloteopsis nigilans. However, that one has an orangish cap, orange gills, and a pinkish brown spore print. Also, the mock oyster mushroom smells somewhat foul. Now, if you're interested in cooking up this mushroom, it can be somewhat tough and bitter. And so to reduce the toughness, I recommend harvesting younger, more tender specimens and also employ longer simmering methods before sauteing and eating the late fall oyster mushroom. So key features, just to reiterate about the late fall oyster mushroom, you're looking for a mushroom that kind of looks like a true oyster mushroom, PLEUROTUS OSTREATUS, but the cap of the late fall oyster mushroom is more olive green in color. You're looking for gills on the underside, which run the entire length of the cap, but that are more yellowish than a true oyster mushroom. You're looking for a short, stubby stalk, and you're looking for a spore print that is yellowish. Next up, we have an interesting little mushroom known as Enoki, or velvet foot. And the Latin name is FLAMMULINA VELUTIPES, and VELUTIPES refers to its velvet-like stem, which we'll talk about in just a couple seconds. So the overall size of this mushroom is on the smaller side, and these mushrooms typically fruit in clusters. Occasionally they'll grow scattered on hardwood trees, specifically on stumps, fallen logs, and standing snags. And again, this mushroom is a decomposer of wood, so we call this mushroom a saprophytic mushroom. And the season of Enoki or velvet foot is fall through winter. They typically fruit throughout North America. The cap of this little mushroom is between 1 to 2.5 inches wide. It's usually convex and it becomes flat with age. And the color is orangish brown to reddish brown. And the texture of it, whenever you touch it, it's usually slimy and sticky when fresh. Now, the underside of the velvet foot mushroom has closely spaced gills that are directly attached to the stalk, and these gills are whitish yellow in color. And the stalk is between 1 to 3 inches long, about 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's smooth and yellowish near the top. However, it becomes dark brown and velvety near the bottom, hence that species name Velutipes. And it's very tough and hard to break. The spore print of this mushroom is a key identifying feature, and the spore print is white. The reason that it's a key identifying feature is because there's a toxic mushroom which kind of resembles Enoki but has a different colored spore print. That mushroom is Galerina marginata, also known as the deadly Galerina mushroom. That mushroom has rusty brown gills and a rusty brown spore print. Remember, velvet foot or Enoki has whitish gills and a white spore print. So key features for Enoki or velvet foot, just to reiterate, you're looking for mushrooms which grow in dense clusters on wood in the wintertime. You're looking for mushrooms with sticky caps and velvety stems. And remember, Velutipes, the species name, refers to the velvety stem. You're looking for whitish gills on the underside and mushrooms which deposit white spore prints. The next edible mushroom could be considered a lookalike to Enoki or velvet foot, and specifically we're talking about the brick cap mushroom, HYPHOLOMA LATERITIUM. This is a small to somewhat medium-sized mushroom that typically grows in clusters, but sometimes it grows scattered on dead hardwood trees. More specifically, you're looking on fallen logs, stumps, and standing snags. And the brickcap mushroom is a decomposer of wood, so again, we call this a saprophytic mushroom. It typically fruits fall through winter, most commonly in eastern North America. The cap of this mushroom is between 1 to 4 inches wide, usually convex to flat with an in-rolled margin, and it's dry to the touch with a brick red color that's paler at the margin. The underside of this mushroom has gills that are closely spaced and directly attached to the stalk. They're whitish at first, but as the mushroom matures, the gills become purplish gray in color. And they become that color because the spores are maturing that color. The stalk of this mushroom is between 2 to 4 inches long, it's whitish, and it becomes reddish near the base. Now you will see that there's a partial ring zone near the apex of the stalk when the mushroom is young, and it kind of disappears when the mushroom is older. The spore color of HYPHOLOMA LATERITIUM, the brickcap, is purple-brown. Lookalikes of the brickcap mushroom include other members of the HYPHOLOMA genus, and not all of them are edible. For example, the sulfur tuft mushroom, which is HYPHOLOMA fasciculaire, is a toxic mushroom which contains a yellow cap with yellowish green gills, and it tastes bitter. Now, whenever I say it tastes bitter, that means you taste it, then spit it out. You don't swallow it because it is a toxic mushroom. But if you do taste it and spit it out, it should be bitter, while the brickcap mushroom tastes mild. So just to reiterate, some key features to help you positively identify the brickcap mushroom, HYPHOLOMA lateritium, include mushrooms which grow in clusters on wood that have brick red caps with paler margins. You're looking for grayish to purplish gills, especially when the mushrooms are older. You're looking for a mushroom which drops a purple-brown spore print and a mushroom that tastes mild, so it lacks a bitter taste. Last but certainly not least, we've got a very unique mushroom which doesn't really resemble the other mushrooms because this one is a jelly mushroom. Specifically, we're talking about the amber jelly roll, EXIDIA RECISA. So this mushroom is on the smaller side, and it typically fruits in dense clusters, though occasionally you'll see it scattered on hardwood sticks and branches. So even though it does grow on wood, you won't really find this mushroom on stumps, logs, or standing dead trees. You usually find them in dense clusters on sticks and branches. And this is a decomposer of wood, so again, we call this a saprophytic mushroom. So even though this mushroom does grow year-round, you really start to see these mushrooms fruit in autumn and winter. And primarily, you're looking in eastern North America for EXIDIA RECISA. Now, each fruiting body is only about 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches across, though the entire aggregation of the amber jelly roll can appear to be several inches long due to the fact that the fruiting bodies cover an entire branch. Now, each fruiting body is an irregularly shaped gelatinous mass, sometimes with a small stalk-like base, and each one is usually translucent, so it's almost like you can kind of see right through them, but not really. The color of EXIDIA RECISA is dark brown to purple brown, becoming blackish when dried. The spore print of the amber jelly roll is white. Now, lookalikes to EXIDIA RECISA include members of the Auricularia genus, which are known as the wood ear mushrooms, and they are edible and they do taste very good. However, Auricularia mushrooms are typically ear-shaped and lighter in color. Other lookalikes include members of the EXIDIA genus, but typically they're more blackish and glob-like in appearance, and they are considered edible as well. Now, what's very unique about EXIDIA RECISA and other jelly mushrooms is the fact that it dehydrates really easily when it's dry outside, then it rehydrates again whenever it's moist outside or whenever you put them in a bowl of water. And so if you find EXIDIA RECISA dried on a stick, you can still bring it home, pop it off the stick, put it in a bowl of water for about 15 minutes, and it'll rehydrate, and then you can cook them up. So just to reiterate some key features about amber jelly roll EXIDIA RECISA, you're looking for brown to purplish brown, translucent masses of gelatinous material that are growing on sticks and branches of hardwoods. So before we wrap up, I just want to mention 3 tips that I have for you whenever it comes to finding all those mushrooms that we talked about and other mushrooms during the winter months. The first tip is to look in areas with a lot of wood and areas with a lot of trees as well. So notice where I am right now. A lot of trees, there's mixed trees, I got conifer trees, I have deciduous trees as well. This is a prime area to explore for all those mushrooms that we talked about. If you're looking in areas with a lot of grasslands and a lot of fields of dead goldenrod this time of year, you might not find all those mushrooms that we talked about or any mushrooms whatsoever. In the springtime, yes, that's a good place to look. In the summertime, in the fall, yeah, explore those fields. But this time of year, especially with snow on the ground, you really want the areas with wood and trees. So head to those areas and you'll have a lot of luck finding the mushrooms that we talked about, because did you notice that every single mushroom we talked about was a saprophytic mushroom, meaning it decomposes wood. Head to the forest, head to the woods, and you have a good chance of finding those mushrooms that we talked about and other mushrooms in the winter months. The second tip I have for you is to head outside during warm spells in the winter months. Now, if you live in an area where it is perpetually negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit all throughout the winter, you might not have as much luck finding a lot of the mushrooms that we talked about compared to areas that have milder winters. For example, where I live in Western Pennsylvania, we have winters where the temperatures go down negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Fahrenheit during some weeks in the winter. So it's during these milder, warmer times where I will definitely go outside and really look to see if I can find some choice edible mushrooms, because I know I have more luck finding the mushrooms in those warmer temperatures compared to the negative 20 degree Fahrenheit weather. And the last, but probably the most important tip I have for you is to spend as much time as you possibly can looking for mushrooms. Look, if you only put in 1 hour every month to hunt mushrooms, how many mushroom species do you really think you're going to find? Probably not a whole lot compared to someone who's doing it for an hour every day, 3 hours every other day, 5 hours a week, 12 hours a week. Then you dramatically increase your chances of finding wild edible mushrooms. Put in the work, make it a priority, and you will definitely be rewarded. I can almost guarantee it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something today. If you want to stay in touch, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Head on over to learnyourland.com, sign up for the email newsletter so we can stay in touch. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Happy winter mushroom hunting.